Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. So we're gonna just start off today talking about ASP.NET Core a bit more. So we're gonna continue from yesterday's stream. We started upgrading a project yesterday to .NET 6 and C# 10, an ASP.NET Core project in particular. And we're just gonna carry that on and see where we get to. Yesterday we looked at a few kind of hidden features that a lot of people haven't been talking about much and are not to the forefront. Like most of the time at the moment, the features that get all the headlines are Blazor and the minimal APIs. But really, if you're going to build a real application, you're probably not going to use minimal APIs, and you can use Blazor for like line of business applications, but for a standard public website, I probably wouldn't use it. So the features that really get used and are important are the kind of small things, the small incremental upgrades that don't get the headlines. So I think those are important, and I had a giant thread on those called the .NET 6 mega thread, improvements mega thread. So I was just going through that list of hidden improvements, kind of not so visible improvements, and we'll carry on going through that list and seeing if we can get some more updates sorted out. So if you don't know who I am, you can find out more about me at rehansaid.com, and you can ping me on my Twitter at rehansaiduk. And then finally, this is currently being live streamed to YouTube and Twitch at the same time. If you want to comment, please comment on YouTube. I don't have the ability to look at Twitch comments very easily. And shall we start? Let's start. Let's switch over to our desktop. And let's go through this list. So I still have my solution open, and let's see what other things we can improve. So yesterday we had a look at creating the new APIs to get HTTP headers, using those new APIs, so that they simplified how you can get certain HTTP headers by providing strongly typed properties instead of having to access a dictionary. So that was good. I can't remember what this is. Create async scope instead of create scope. So let's have a look at that next. So this is regarding dependency injection. Let's see. It looks like, oh, okay. So this is if your type implements async disposable, you need to create an async scope. Now, it's probably a good idea to always use create async scope instead of create scope, because you don't know whether the types you're resolving within that scope will be async disposable or not. At least it's very difficult to know that. So, and that's going to throw an exception. So let's see if we use that API anywhere. And we do. I thought we did. So this is actually in our test project. If we go over here, we have this thing called custom web application factory. And then what this does is it news up an instance of our application for our tests. And it's an in-memory version of our application using this web application factory API. And the reason we're using create scope is so that we can new up this iApplication option, this iOptions type. application options. There it is. So that allows us to just pull out. So these application options, they exist over here in this API. And this just represents all of the settings in the app settings.json file. So all of this, application insights, crash profiles, compression, forward headers, Redis, Serilog, whatever, exists in here. If you're new to the stream, you can ignore all these if-def, because this is actually a project template that you can instantiate using the .NET New command. So these are all optional features that you can turn on or off on the project. But by default, the ones that are not grayed out are turned on right now. So, and the way this is registered is down here in configure, valid and validate singleton application options, and we pass in the configuration and we bind the two together. So that gives us an option, the option to instantiate this guy and pull out all the options using a strongly typed type. So if we go back here, we can actually, I don't think we need async scope in this particular case. We can actually simplify this a little though, because we don't need I options here, I think. So let's rerun that test. So this function that we use to register application options and bind it to the configuration file in appsettings.json, this function here, it actually registers I options, application options, and also it registers this strongly typed type as well. So we don't actually need I options around that. We can simplify that, and that should still work. And it's not throwing an exception, so I actually think we will stick with create scope in this particular case, but I think it's something I'd have to keep an eye on in future. So in this particular case, if it threw an exception, the test would fail, which is a good thing. I can come and fix that. But if this was in the real application, I'd probably stick to create async scope just in case. So we've done that one. We'll come back to this one in a sec. We'll come back to this one as well. Use HTTP activity feature to get the current activity. Let's have a look at this one. Where is it? This one. So this is an interesting one. This is regarding OpenTelemetry. So for those who don't know about OpenTelemetry, I highly recommend you go over to my blog and read about OpenTelemetry. Is a 3-part series and soon to be a 4-part series on the subject. This is going to take over the way you do logging, metrics, and traces in your application. So what do I mean by that? You can log some information using this line over here. So that's what logging an event looks like. And this is what logging some sort of timed thing looks like. So log the start of an activity and log the end of it using this using statement. So here's some long running activity. And then you can add additional context. So for example, in this particular case, I'm logging the fact that the HTTP method is a get in this particular case. And then finally, this is what you can get out at the end of it. So this is an application called Jaeger this collects all that open telemetry information and it can show you some nice kind of waterfall type, I don't know what these are called, waterfall charts, not sure. And it shows you how long each call within the application took, including things external to the application like Redis and MySQL. And it will give you additional information if you drill down into each one of these lines as well. So that's open telemetry. Things like Serilog and other logging frameworks. I can't think of any right now. Serilog is the only one I use. I don't think they will have much reason to exist soon. So this is the future. Right now, open telemetry collects logs, traces, and metrics. But the metrics side is like an alpha, and I think the logs is a beta or something. So that it really only collects traces at the moment, which is good enough for creating a waterfall chart like this. But if you want logs as well, you're gonna have to wait. If you want metrics, so things like what was the CPU, what was the memory usage, and so on, you're gonna have to wait. So let's have a look at this new API and I'll talk about what this new API does. So let's get rid of this window on the side, make this a bit smaller. So in this particular case, I don't think we need to use this new API, but let's just briefly showcase what this is all about. So let's pretend we need to log some a trace. So we want to find out more information about this fancy new API. So why is this? There we go. So we want to log a trace and find out more information about this. So what we can do is have something called an activity source. So this is just the name of some activity that's happening. So in this case, we'll call it like get page. And then this is the details of the application. For now, I'll just leave that empty. And then if we want to log it, we can come over here, stick this code in. Actually, I think this is not this is the name of the application. Come on. Oh, are we gonna take a while? There, the name and the version of the application. So this is like API template. Like, I don't know, 1.0.0. You can get this from the assembly product information. So I have a star in there for some reason. So I actually have a helper method to do that. So this guy just gets it from the assembly, pulls out the assembly product attribute and the assembly description and the file version, and then I can use that here. Assembly information dot current dot name or product name and the version. So now I have my activity source, and now I can measure an activity. So in this case, I'm calling get page, and now I can await that .configure await false, and now I will have timed this operation, and it will show up as one of those bars I showed you earlier in the chart. And then I can also add additional tags. I think it's add tag. So in this case, I don't know, what can I add? Page number. So command dot page options. So number of items. So this is the number of items you want to pull back from the page. So I can log that as additional information that goes alongside this activity. And that's how you log new things in OpenTelemetry traces. Definitely worth checking out the blog post because that contains a lot more information. So I'm just going to undo that. Let's go back and just check in this simplified code here. Remove unnecessary options. Push that. Cool. So we've checked that one out. We don't need to use this. That's fine. Add system.text.json source generators. Oh, I forgot to talk about why this is a good thing. So there was an API. So if I wanted to, it's too late. Did I undo that? Oh, right. If I have an activity, I have one here already, but if I wanted to create another activity from that activity, there's a function I have to call. I can't remember the name. Start. And I can start another activity from that one. But what if I didn't have this guy? What if I didn't have this activity that was kindly passed down to me by this delegate over here? Well, in that case, that's what this is all about. So this API from the HTTP context, which, do I have that right now? I don't think I do. If you do have the HTTP context, you can pull out this thing called HTTP activity feature, and that pulls out the activity. And then you can use that and create a child activity from there and then record something. That's what that API is all about. I should probably blog about this. Let me make a note of that. That would be a good, easy, simple, small blog post. Let's keep going. Source generators. So what was this blog post? So there were new APIs to use source generators with system.text.generate.json, and I'm not certain that this is going to be useful for most people just building an application. It's probably more for library authors. Is that right? I can't remember. This needs a bit more reading, I think. I'll come back to this. I have to reread this blog post. It's been a while since I read this. So we'll come back to that one. Configuration.getRequiredSection. We added a helper to make it easier to throw if a required section of configuration is missing. Okay. Get section. So I think the old API was called get section. So let's find that. So in this case, we really want a get required section call. So we want it to throw if the configuration doesn't contain a section called Redis, i.e. it doesn't contain this section of JSON in the app settings.json file. And then we also want to do the same everywhere else pretty much, I think. Let's just make sure. Yeah, everything is required except Kestrel. The Kestrel section is not required. Why didn't I make that required? Let's go back here. Okay, you can get away without that section. So this guy. But do you want to? Probably not. We should make that required too. And in here. So this is interesting. Let's talk about this for a minute. So I have this class bound to the whole JSON file. So it has a section for Kestrel and Redis and all the others top level JSON elements. But I'm also getting a particular section when I need it. And I'm wondering if I should just, I guess this is because I don't have that strongly typed application options type at this point when I'm building the web host builder. So builder context dot services. Yeah, I don't have dot get. Can I do get required section? That's odd. It's telling me in IntelliSense that that exists, but then I can't actually get into it. Service provider. Weird. That's very strange. Why can't I do that? Web host builder. Indeed, it doesn't have those types. I don't know why IntelliSense is wrong. It could be a Visual Studio 2022 bug. Very strange. That thinks it's a web host builder context. And over here, oh, I was looking at the wrong thing. Here we go. Web host builder context. Hosting environment and configuration. That's the only things it provides actually. So I'm not sure where those other things are coming in from. So yeah, I don't have access to the strongly typed application options, and then that's why I'm having to do all this. Let's see if I have access to it elsewhere. So in this particular case as well, I have the MVC builder services dot get. I can't get required, and that's just add services. That's the I service collection. Yeah, so I don't have access to it here either. Do I have access to it here? No, once again, don't have it. And over here, also don't have it. So it looks like in all the places where I don't have it, I'm forced to go and rebind to a particular part of the configuration and bind it to a particular type. But in other places I have the whole of the application options, and that's what I'm binding to in my tests. So, oh, in my unit, I can remove that namespace. So in my tests, I just want all of the options, and I can use those in my unit tests, like so. So I have I don't think I'm using it here. So yeah, I'm not using those options in my test because I didn't need them, but I have them available to me. So let's go and quickly just review what I've changed. It looks like we can drop some using statements. What changed to cause that? Bit strange. All I did was call GetRequiredSection and I can drop one of the using statements. That's fine. That's fine as well. And I can drop that using statement as well. Let's just run the tests just to make sure we haven't destroyed anything. Looks like it's going to go green. We'll just fire up the application as well just to make sure, because some of the code is not called in the test, and specifically that's the part in the program.cs file. We'll just, oh, it's doing it all for me. Cool, that still works. Let's check in those changes. So what did we do? We switched from use instead of get section. That's a nice little tip there. Things like that, that wasn't even in the blog post. So the only way I found that out was just following David Fowler, who's a great person to follow on Twitter. Here we go. Here's a nice one, argument null exception. So let's find all the argument null exceptions we're throwing, which is quite a few. And you know, if this thing is null, throw an argument null exception. That can now change to .ThrowIfNull. And how does this work? ThrowIfNull foo. And we can just do that. Param name, the name of the parameter with which argument corresponds. Do we need the param name? Let's do a quick test. So fire up a new instance of Visual Studio, or run up a quick new project. It can just be a console application this time. I've created so many console applications just from having to try something out. So throw if null. So let's do var foo equals, well, string foo equals. Let's make it null so we can actually throw. Let's not provide that first and see what happens. See if we got it. Oh, we got the parameter. How is that working? How does it know the param name? Let's check it out. Throw if null, there's the argument, and okay, column argument expression. So this is new. You can now say, I want the name of this argument in here. That's very nice. Very nice. I wonder if the other argument exceptions have this. So argument out of range exception. Nope. Argument exception. Nope. So it's just argument null exception that has this new fancy API, which is a bit of a shame. But we can simplify a lot of code from using this. So I'm just going to grab that bit there, and we'll I can get rid of name of, can't I? And then that's nice. It's going to save a lot of lines of code and time if you add it up. This is probably one of my favorite features of .NET 6 actually, just because you have to you have to make these calls so often. And this will save a lot of time. Just need to remember to use it now. That's the trouble. It's always the trouble when there's a new API coming out. You have to remember to use it. I wonder if there will be a refactoring at some point saying if you use this old style, switch it over to use the new one. That would be a great thing for somebody in the community to add, or even Microsoft. I hope it's Microsoft and they just build it in. I don't like having to install extra analyzers. And the last one, I think that's it. So if I run find all again, all of them have been changed to throw if null, which is brilliant. Use throw if null. That was a nice one. Use the new configuration manager API for quicker startup. Let's check this one out. I think I needed a thorough reread of this one as well. So there's a new configuration manager instead of this older configuration API, configuration builder, and so on. So it's supposed to provide a quicker startup time. I think I'll come back to this one. I'll reread that and we'll do that in another stream. Developer exception page is now registered for you. So let's have a look at this one. So before you had to write this bit of code here, and that would register the developer exception page. But now you don't need to do that anymore. So how does that happen? That's all very magic, and I don't like magic. This removes the need to manually register the middleware as developers. So I reckon that's all happening in this create builder bit of code over here, and we should certainly check that out and make sure and see what it's doing. So if we head over to the ASP.NET repo, I can't remember the was it .NET? Yeah, there we go. And we should look for create builder. It's used in quite a lot of places. So what I can do is search for web application class. There we go. There's web application. And then we can search for create builder. So what does this actually do? Just calls the constructor. Where's the constructor? Here's the constructor. And we're calling new application builder. And we're also pulling out a logger factory, creating a logger. So let's go check out application builder. Here's our application builder. Somewhere in here, I can't remember where it was, there is a place which builds up the whole application. Create default builder. Let's have a look at the code really quick. So in our application, we call create host builder, and we create a new host builder, and I manually add all the bits because I don't like the magic. The alternative way to do this is to use, is it web host builder dot, no, host builder. I can't remember the API now. Let's quickly create a new project and remember what the API looked like. Add a new project, web API, next, we'll do a .NET 5 web API, create that, and we'll do a .NET 6 web API, next, .NET 6, okay. So in the old world, we called host.createDefaultBuilder. Okay, so that guy, I wonder if that guy has also changed. So we should check that API. And then in the new world, we call web application.createBuilder. So we should see what those two APIs are now doing in .NET 6 for you, because they hide a lot of magic. We should figure that out. So we'll start with the .NET 5 version actually. Not class, host. That doesn't contain anything. This is it, create default builder. So if I look at host, this guy, static class. Just to make sure this is calling down into the same code. That doesn't exist anymore. I guess they've changed this for .NET 6. Does that API exist anymore in .NET 6? Let's find out. So can I do host? Yeah, it still does exist. So why is it not there? Oh, it's in Microsoft.extensions.hosting. There we go. My fault. So if we go back to .NET, if we look at, I believe it was runtime, and we want to find class host. If we should do static class host, where are you? Host class. There it is. So this calls down to create default builder. This creates a new host builder, and that calls configure defaults on it. So I think this is a new host builder. No, this is a web host. So what is a host builder? Let's find, oops. So this builds up some of the configuration. In-memory collection, blah, blah, blah. Creates a hosting environment. Oh, it fills up the application name. Get name. So it just uses the assembly name for the application name. I always change that to be the assembly product name because that's just more human readable. And then creating a context. Hosting environment, application lifetime, so all the standard services that you get from starting a host. It's firing up those host options, add logging. Okay, that's all the basic stuff. And then in here, I think it does all the additional ASP.NET Core stuff. So we are, if args is not equal to null, use configuration, add command line. Oh, we forgot this first line. Content root key, use content root, get current directory. Let's go over to ours. And so we use content root, get current directory. Web host defaults. They're calling add command line. So I think I'm gonna put these side by side. So configure app configuration. Oh no, add environment variables, add a command line if args is not null. Configure app configuration. So we do all this here. So add a JSON file, optional true, reload false. So I always turn reload false because, so what this does, reload does is if you change the app settings.json file, it will reload it for you. But the issue is that most times when you're using the configuration, most code that uses configuration doesn't reload itself. So just the fact that the JSON file reloaded doesn't mean that the configuration has reloaded. So I think it's safer to just restart an application if you're going to change the configuration. So I always turn reload off, and it's quicker as well as less. There's more of a slight performance boost I've heard. And then host environment name.json. Then we load user secrets, or I actually load a directory. So there's a configuration directory under the application. where you can optionally add some keys, files, so you can configure the application using files. This is good if you have, I don't know, like secrets like certificates and things. So that's really useful. The defaults don't do that for you. Then we add user secrets. Let's have a look at user secrets. Where are they? Here we go. And we only want to add that if there is an application name and we're in development. Add environment variables and then add the command line. And then if the user has turned on application insights in my particular application, we also, in my project template, we also add that. The defaults don't do that for you. Then we go back up. So we've done our configuration, and then they go on to configure logging. I use Serolog, way better logging than whatever this default is, the Microsoft extensions.logging provider. And logging builder. This is interesting. There's some open telemetry stuff in here that is configuring in the logging builder. We should check that out. Add configuration. So it's adding a logging configuration, adding a console, debug, and event source logger. What do? I can't remember. So all my configuration is set up using this Serolog section over here. This is the data that we enrich with every log. So we log the exception details, the environment username, the machine name, the process ID, the process name, any open telemetry spans if that feature is turned on by the user, and the thread ID. And then if I go back to the program class, I also log to the console, to the debug window, but not to the event source logger. Why didn't I do that? I can't remember in this event log. I think it's more because I just wanted the user to decide for themselves where they want to log to. Yeah, I think leaving it out is fine. Use default service provider. Let's check that out. Do I call that? Yep. If it's development, validate the scopes and validate on build as well. So this is important. So validate that all the services can be created during build service provider call. This will save you from having an exception in production, hopefully. So I don't know why that isn't turned on by default. It should be, I think. So the defaults are okay, but they can be improved, and that's why I haven't used them. What else is there in configure web defaults? Let's go check that out. So we're configuring the app configuration. So what are we saying here? Use static web assets. Should we go check that out? So this is this particular overload, I believe. Use static web assets core. So what this is doing, I think, is loading up the static files middleware for you. And once again, this is something that's fine for a default, but you may not want static web assets, and you're just having to pay for it just because it's the default. If development, use static web asset. Oh, hold on. It's only in development. Why is that? What is this actually doing? Microsoft.ASP.NET static web assets.xml. What is this file? This mysterious file. Oh, it's me. I asked this question before, and back when ASP.NET .NET Core 5 was out, and the answer was, oh, it's for Razor. So yeah, we totally don't care about Razor because we're building an API. So this line of code here is just wasting your time. Use Kestrel. Yep, we do that. Where do I do that? Can't remember. Use Kestrel. We turn off the server HTTP header for a bit of security. You don't want the world to know that you're using Kestrel. People can fingerprint your web server and find out, but make it a bit harder for them. So that's not in the defaults. And then fallback. What are they doing here? Oh yeah, this is configuring the allowed web hosts. So we don't do that. We configure it as a middleware, the host filtering options. So we do that manually in a startup class where I think it's makes more sense. They're using iChange token source, so their options are reloadable. Startup filter. So they're using the forwarded headers, middleware, add routing. Do I add routing manually? I don't need to because it's there. Use IIS and use IIS integration. So use IIS. IIS integration is for out of process hosting, and you can switch to that if you need to. But you need IIS for local, if you're using IIS Express at development time. So when you, oops, I hit play by mistake. That tiny button is a bit too small. It's shut that down. So if you use IIS Express to start your application, i.e. in your launch settings, if you use this particular configuration where command name is IIS Express, you need that there for that to work. Let's keep going. You don't need IIS integration unless you're running with full IIS and you want to run with out of process. You want run .NET out of process, which is a bit slower than running in process, which is what use IIS does. And then use startup, and then yeah, that's all the standard stuff. So let's go back and revisit what this is doing. This is interesting. Let's have a look here. So the logging configuration is calling into this type here, activity tracking options, span ID, trace ID, parent ID. So that's all open telemetry stuff. We should check out what that stuff is actually doing. Let's check that out. There's a interesting looking issue here. We use scopes to identify log entries. I think this might be in the documentation. Oh, there was another page there that was worth opening. I use DuckDuckGo because I don't want to be tracked by Google for no reason. let's find out. Defines flags to indicate which trace context paths should be included with the logging scopes. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I think what this is doing, fascinating. Okay, so what that is doing, that bit of code there, is if there are any OpenTelemetry activities, like I showed you earlier, there's that activity type. Well worth reading up on this on my blog. If you just search for OpenTelemetry, you'll find some posts. I'm assuming that you've already read that. So what this is doing is taking the span ID, trace ID, and parent ID of the current activity and adding it to the current log. That's what that is doing. And you can configure that. You can change what you want logged. So you can say, I don't want anything logged. I want the parent ID, span ID, trace flags, trace state. I'm not sure what trace state and trace flags are. But the IDs are the important parts. That's actually pretty cool, but yeah, I haven't seen anyone mention that in any blog or anything. So very fascinating. Let's go back. So I actually do something very similar. So I actually run a project called serilog.enriches.span. And what this does is, if you're using Serilog, it takes pretty much the same things in that we just looked at, the span ID, the parent ID, and so on, and it logs those in your Serilog log, and we're using just that one line there to add that. So I actually configure it in appsettings.json file with span. So that's what that is doing there. So each one of, every time you call logger.log information or whatever, log error, we are adding the span ID, the parent ID, and span unique identifier, parent unique identifier, and ASP.NET's trace unique identifier. So pretty much the exact same information. That's interesting. I feel vindicated for creating this NuGet package now, because it's exactly what Microsoft is doing, except they're doing it by default and kind of secretly without telling you. Fascinating. So since we already do that, we don't need to add that to our code, but that's nice of them to do that. That's actually quite useful if you're using the default logging, which you may be using for some reason. Not sure if it's useful if you're not using OpenTelemetry though. Is it useful? I don't think it is. So if you're not using OpenTelemetry, you're paying a slight cost there for no reason. You probably want to turn that off. Cool. Let's go back to our code. Oh, we forgot about the developer exception page. Use developer exception page. And we need to figure out how that's happening. That was why we came here, and then we went off on a tangent and started looking at the host, how all the host building stuff is working. There's 8 pages here of use developer exception page, and the one I want is not in any startup or program file. Startup with custom invalid, generic host. It's kind of hard to find out where this thing is happening. It's called in a lot of places, isn't it? Cause startup, test server startup. Components, WebAssembly. We should look at that as well. Startup request limit size. So there are a rate limiting APIs, I understand, in ASP.NET Core with .NET 6. I want to add that as an optional feature to my API template. This might be it. Default builder. It's always on the last page with GitHub. I'm not sure why that is. Here we go. If it's development, add the developer exception page. And where is this being called? Configure application. References. No. Definition. This must be called in here somewhere. There we go. And that's called in the constructor web application builder. We should read through this as well to see what this guy is doing. So web application builder, if we go back to our console app, is, I'm assuming, is this guy. Yeah, it's creating a web application builder here. So this is the .NET 6 minimal API code. Let's see what this is doing. So very similar to the other one actually. We're creating an app configuration using command line, adding a command line. Configure web host defaults. Apply application name. What is that doing? Web host defaults. Application key. Application name. Okay, so you can change the application name from configuration. That's interesting. Why would you want to do that though? Okay. So in my one, in my template, what I do is I set the application name early on in the program main, and I set it to the assembly product information attribute value. So the same value that will get baked into the assembly. That makes the most sense to me. It's basically this value here in the project file. You can ignore the value. This gets replaced when this a project is created from this project template. So they've set it from configuration. Fine, I guess, if you want to change the application name, but do you really want to do that very often? I don't think so. And then what's this thing here? Application name. Okay, so you can change the application name through this web application options as well. What else can you change? The args, the environment name. That's it. There's actually this options in guy here that sets the application name. Configure, apply the options after the args. So I guess that applies host configuration. If the environment name is not null, set the environment name into the configuration builder. It's interesting that the environment name just lives in the configuration builder now. Application name, content root path, web root path. Okay. Everything is very, very configurable if you know what you're doing. Track hosted services, stop tracking here. Collect the hosted services separately since we want those to run after the user's hosted services. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Track hosted services. Let's Google that really quick. There's no documentation on it. I wonder if there's any code on it. No, there's no comment. That's not very nice. So attempt to set the application name from options. Apply the options after the args. Where was that code? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Yeah, here we go. Collect hosted services separately since we want those to run after the user's hosted services. Okay. Capture the host configuration values here. Okay. Wire up the host configuration here. This is when you call build. So this is when this is on this line over here. Let's see what that's doing. It's creating an in-memory collection. I think that's all quite straightforward stuff. Yeah, I think that's all quite straightforward stuff. Configure application. So this gets called, where did this get called again? So back in the constructor, just before setting the application name. Let's see, endpoint root builder key, use routing is called before web application. This is where we're setting our developer exception page. So because I'm not using this default web application builder, I still need this bit of code in my startup. So I'm still using a startup file because I think it makes sense to do so. And where did I stick that? Developer. Oh, did I just remove it? Oh, here it is. And I didn't put it right at the top. I added a bunch of middlewares in between. Wrap the entire destination pipeline in use routing, use endpoints, essentially run source. Use routing. This is the run source in the comment here. Use endpoints, that comes at the end. And yeah, I think that's it. So I don't think I have anything to change there. We've learned a lot. We've learned that there's some funky stuff, new stuff happening under the covers. They should really highlight the fact that this exists in here and whether it exists also in the old style API the host.create default builder, which I don't think it does actually. So yeah, that's worth knowing. So no, it's not registered for us, so we can hit that. We did that in the second stream. Record types. So am I using any record types? Yes, I am. And this is going to be a read-only record type. Can it be read-only? The modify read-only is not. Is it record read-only class record? Record class or class record? Nope. Record class. What does this do? The modify read-only is not valid for this item. Is it read-only only if it's a record struct? I think that's right. Yes. Classes, record classes are read-only by default already. So I think that's why they omitted that. So let's quickly just Google that. Record class, record struct. Is this C#10? Records. Where was the option to pick what version of C# this is? That used to exist, right? I'm not going crazy. Record class. Alright, let's search for the word read-only. Position properties are immutable in a record class and a read-only struct. They are immutable in a record struct. For record types and read-only record struct types. Okay, so you don't need the read-only keyword for a record class, only a record struct. This could be a struct actually, because it only has 3 string values inside it. Doesn't matter. Let's keep it like that. So that's, I think, so the default actually for a record is a record class. There's now record structs as well in C#10, and they're just structs but also records, i.e. you can pass in the property names here. What's the advantage of adding the class keyword here? I think it's just completeness, because there's now record structs. It's worth knowing what type of record there is. I think at some point there might be an analyzer in an editor config file somewhere that covers this particular feature. I wonder if there is already. If I search in here, and can I control F in here? No, I can't. That's a bit sad. Can I control F in here? Nope. Namespace declarations. Yeah, I set that already. Prefer system.hashcode in getHashcode. That is a suggestion. That's a setting I need to set up actually. New line preferences. Okay, so there's some settings that I need to set up in my editor config file. Tab size. Okay. So we'll switch from a record class, record to record class. I'm just doing it for completeness. And then what did I change over here? Nothing at all. Oh, I think I just added a space by accident. So we can go back and say, yeah, we've done that. Search for potential const interpolated strings. So static read only, just search for static read only. And what does this mean? I don't have any. Okay, so what this means is if you have public const a equal foo, const string foo equals whatever, public const string bar equals, you can now do this. Oh, that's in, I pasted that in the .NET 5 one. So if I do that in the .NET 6 one, that will now work in theory. Oh, because I'm using, let's stick it in a class instead. Is that going to work? Yeah, that works. So there's no errors anymore because this is now allowed. So in the past you had to do static read only and that would work, but this can now just be a straight up const, which will give you a slight performance boost. Although I think the compiler already turned static read only interpolated strings into consts under certain circumstances for performance reasons. So we don't need to do anything there. That's cool. That one's done as well. And we'll come back and do some of these other ones another time. So I think we've gotten slightly over time today. And so what did we cover? We looked at OpenTelemetry. We looked at the new hosting stuff in .NET 6 that does some OpenTelemetry stuff as well, actually. Sets up the developer exception page for you. We looked at some of the other things that it does. Some of the code that I include in my default startup that the defaults in ASP.NET Core don't include. We looked at some of the new APIs, so like create async scope, HTTP activity feature, that's to do with OpenTelemetry again, GetRequiredSection instead of getSection for configuration, the new fancy .NET function ArgumentNullException.ThrowIfNull. So a bunch of stuff, record types at the end as well. So a lot covered. And we did a bit of investigation today as well, a bunch of time in GitHub. Only thing I'll leave you with is I wrote a blog post the other day about the Windows Package Manager. And this is just how I've set up this tool WinGet, which is built into Windows now, to install a bunch of applications for development. Things like 7-zip, you know, Git, setting up your terminal, things like that. And I think it was reasonably well received. So do check that blog post out. I think I this morning I was playing around. I saw Scott Hanselman was showing how to set up a terminal prompt in Windows 11. So I had some ideas from this. So I think I'm going to expand on this a little bit with a follow-up blog post showing how you can also set up your terminal in a kind of an automated single PowerShell script. So the PowerShell script just goes through and installs all the apps you're interested in, sets up your terminal, and away you go, rather than having to go and manually go to websites and install things, which takes forever on Windows. Cool. So once again, if you want to contact me, give me a ping on Twitter and on YouTube and Switch. Like, subscribe. It really helps the channel out with the YouTube algorithm and the Twitch algorithms. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.